Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's edition of the Our America channel. My name is Thornton Prayer. I'm a citizen, a patriot, and I care very deeply about our country. I'm doing a short series of videos talking about various political fantasies. Right now, I'd like to talk about libertarian fantasies. Libertarians, to me, are an interesting breed. And in a certain way, I actually agree with libertarians. In a perfect world, what libertarians say they believe in makes sense to me. I like the idea of a small government, of limited government, free of interference and tyranny. That's a great idea. And that would work in a perfect world. We don't live in a perfect world. One of the things that's very clear is that human beings, left to our own devices, can do really bad, nasty things to each other. And the purpose of the government, in our society at least, in theory at least, is that the government is accountable to people, to the people. That should be and is supposedly a bedrock principle from the very inception of the United States. And as a result, the government should be accountable to the people. Now, we have problems, and I think a lot of people will agree with this, libertarians and otherwise, is that the government, the American government, especially on the federal level, is no longer accountable to the people. But I disagree with the libertarian belief that somehow, well, if we shrink the government, everything will be fine. I don't think that's accurate. I think what will happen, and I think this has been borne out, especially from the great financial crisis starting in 2008, is that if we shrink the government too much, various forces in both the public and the private sector will get out of control and will actually damage the people. Now, it's a trade-off. There's no perfect size of the government, I would agree, unless it becomes oppressive. But the flip side of that is that libertarians believe, from what I can tell, that human beings are these rational creatures and that all we need to do is engage in basically what some people refer to as homo economicus, meaning that we're all rational beings, we're all rational actors, and all of our transactions that we have with each other, personal and professional, will be done on a rational basis, and we'll engage in, if you want to use fancy economic speech, utilitarian function-based ways. That's not how human beings operate. That's not how human beings operate inside or outside the United States. And the bottom line is that the government is one of the ways we have at our disposal, when it works on behalf of the people, to restrain ourselves from our worst impulses. If you look at some of the early papers, the Federalist Papers, that the people who built the Constitution, they talk about these things. They knew that human beings can do despotic and dangerous things, and that's the role of the government, to make it accountable to all of us, to the people. So I can sympathize with my libertarian friends that, yeah, in a perfect world, when you have rational human beings who are genuinely trying to understand how to relate to one another and doing it in a rational, utilitarian-based way, yeah, it makes sense. But right now, unless somebody does something really weird, that's just not going to work in a large-scale society like ours. Our government is supposed to be accountable to us, and we need to work toward that, as opposed to simply saying, well, let's just get rid of the government and hope for the best, because that simply doesn't work. We've seen it doesn't work. I'm not trying to attack libertarians, but I'm asking libertarians to really step back and understand that we need to do certain things. I think in the perfect libertarian world, the way I would use it as a metaphor is to say, like, well, why don't we get rid of all stop signs and traffic lights and let people rationally figure out how to drive in their traffic patterns? There'd be 100 times more car accidents if we did that. We know better. It's like saying the same thing we might say about child abuse laws. Why don't we get rid of the child abuse laws? Because we know the vast majority of people will treat their children fairly and so on and so forth and won't damage them. We know for a fact, because it happens today, that people will abuse children. And if we didn't have laws in place to try to stop that, it would probably get worse. The legal framework, the regulatory framework we have in our country isn't an accident. Has it gotten out of control to some extent? Yeah, probably I'll agree with that. But to say we should get rid of it, that doesn't reflect the reality of human nature. I encourage those, if you want to take the time and the effort, to read the Federalist Papers to get an understanding of how the founding fathers, or the people who wrote the Constitution, understand these things. And to my libertarian friends, I'm going to ask you to rethink some of the fantasy-based beliefs you have about, human nature, because it just doesn't reflect what will go on. If you have any thoughts or opinions or comments you'd like to leave, feel free to do so below the video. Again, this is today's edition of the Our America channel. Thank you for watching.